Hi, we're going to make procedural lemons in Blender using geometry nodes. There's also a Medium article where you can go through and it'll explain a lot of what we're doing in depth and do little deep dives on different steps. And then there's also a Gumroad asset with a finished product with a lot of extra bells and whistles and settings. There are presets to make all your favorite citrus fruit as well as avocado mode where you can override those presets. And links to the Medium article and the Gumroad asset are in the description. Let's jump into it. Okay, I'm going to start with a new scene with a default cube. We're actually going to use the default cube. I'm going to give myself a little more work area down here. Shift F3 is going to bring up the geometry nodes editing panel. You can add a new geometry node here or a new modifier for geometry nodes here. You can add a new node group. So we are disconnecting the group input and adding an icosphere. And the reason we didn't create an icosphere and put a nodes group on it is because if you generate your geometry within the nodes group, you don't have to worry about the scale of your object. When you put your nodes group on it, you know that it's always going to render correctly. I'm going to rename this citrus group. I'll rename the cube citrus. Just keep things organized, and we don't want this to look so faceted, so I'm going to add a set shade smooth. Bring this up. So we're going to make a lemon, so I'm going to bring in some reference images of a lemon. This is PureRef. It's a great free software. Kind of just holds images above your project. So we're going to think about breaking up the lemon into simple shapes, and we're essentially just going to think of it as 3 spheres, one for the top nub, one for the body, and one for the bottom nub. So instead of making 3 spheres, what I'm going to do is make 3 transform geometries. And we're just going to pipe the same sphere into all 3 of them. And then to see all of them, we'll also need a join geometry. And I'm just clicking Control A and then searching the node that I want. I'm going to stick this into all the geometries. We don't want it going directly into the join, we just want the result. All of our geometries. If I go into wireframe mode, you can see, let me move these, you can see I actually have 3 spheres. Great. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, so it's more clear what these are, I'm clicking F2 to rename them. I'm going to rename this one top nub, rename this one body. You might forget these are transform geometries because we've renamed them, but just with time, you'll learn what different nodes are and not have to worry about the name because it's better to have them named what they are versus what they were. I'm also going to add some values. Shift D to duplicate. One value will be the size of our lemon. One will be nub width. One will be the nub height or the protrusion of the nubs. Okay, so we're going to hook up these size, width, and height controls. First, the size. We want to run into the radius of our icosphere. And then we want the height to control the protrusion of the top and bottom nub. And right now this translation is a vector of 3 values, and we want to control just the z. So we're going to put a combine node into the translation, and now we can pipe in just a z. We're going to do the same the bottom nub. And what we want to do is add some math. Essentially for this Z, we want to add size plus the nub height, which we'll put as 0.5. Now we've got a nub that can go up and down. It's dependent on the size of the lemon. So now to look up the bottom one, because it's going down, it's actually a subtract size minus the nub height. Put that in the Z. Actually put that up, and that is because you actually want to start at negative the size, not the size to go down to subtract that number from. So I'm going to duplicate this to get another math node. I'm just going to multiply that size by -1. Now, fingers crossed that the nub height adjusts the protrusion, size adjusts the size of all of them, and keeps the protrusion equal. 0 is centering the nubs on the surface of the body. Negative to go in, positive to go out. Okay, the nub width can be a little more straightforward. I'm going to put in 0.25 and just put this into the scale, the top and bottom. And now we have the scale and this protrusion. You can play with that, and the body, you could scale it up a little on the Z to make it feel a little more like a lemon shape. So we're kind of looking at this reference and getting it kind of close. Okay, and here is the fun part. We're going to take this joined geometry, which right now is 3 separate spheres overlapping one another. And we're going to go mesh to volume. What this is going to do is it turns this into kind of just a cloud of data or data. And then we're going to do volume to mesh. That brings it back into a single mesh. And if you're familiar with the remesh modifier, it does something kind of similar. And you can kind of mess with the settings here, but we're going to add so much texture to it with the shader that this is going to be good for what we're doing. Okay, so what I'm going to do is move the references for a second. Give us another plane. Hit 7 to look at an overview. What I want to do is apply a shader. Set material. I can just put the default shader in there, but what we're going to do is rename it Citrus. Shift F3 to go to the shader editor. For giggles right now, I'm just going to turn this yellow. Now what I'm going to do, a little bonus lighting tutorial. I'm going to put one light here. I'm going to duplicate it. Back it off on this side. Get a little warmer. The big soft fall off. I'm going to duplicate this light. Put it behind on this side. Turn the brightness down and get a little backlight and light shining through. And I'm going to rename these the key, the fill, and the fill side edge. Great, now let's build the shader. Okay, I'm going to bring the references back in. With this selected, we've got our shader. And what I want to do is make a noise texture. There is a shortcut, Control Shift, and you can preview a texture. I kind of set up the texture detail on here. You can change this to 4D. Yes. And then you get this W asset that's like time, where you could pick a variation within the settings you have, which is nice. And this broad, soft, cloudy noise, what we're going to use it for is a mix color, and it's just going to be a variation. Put it into the factor of the mix. I'll show you what that'll do, just with the two contrasting colors. That's going to essentially just give us a modeling of color throughout this. And if you had it just be, like a Crayola crayon. Oh, we're not going through the shader. I'm like, why does that look so weird? Yellow all over, it would not look quite right. So you model the color a little bit, and that kind of buys you a little bit of realism, just because in the real world, nothing's perfectly flat the same color, especially something organic like fruit. Okay, next, this is one of my favorites. What we're going to do is do a Voronoi texture. And it's essentially, if you look at it, it's like a giraffe or cracks in the desert. But what we're going to do is use as a light dark value map to the center of each cell. And what that lets us do is essentially use it to generate a bunch of little dots. I think, yeah. So with those little dots, I'm going to add a color ramp. Kind of like let us get them a little dark towards the center and kind of pick the amount of fall off we want. And this is messing me up. Could also kind of pick the amount of contrast or height of these dots. And what we'll do is another mix color into the factor. Say, do two contrasting colors again. I'm kind of isolated from one another, like these little dots on a lemon. What we want is, it's an easy way to do it, is set these to really obvious colors, and we want the red to be maybe a slightly duller, darker yellow, and we want the blue to be that model texture that we looked at, that we built. So that gives us kind of the beginnings of the color of our lemon. And you can work with your reference images and tweak this till it looks how you want. But as we move forward and get into the real grit and texture, you'll see that a little bit of the color variation goes a long way. Now For a fun part, we are going to take this speckled pore Voronoi type texture and map it to the roughness and the bump map. So first I'm going to duplicate this color ramp because we want to tweak it but not mess with our color setup we just did. Run a new Voronoi into there. Actually going to change this to this smooth version just because I've noticed it has a little bit more of a soft organic fall off, and I think we're going to want that. I'm going to add a bump node, put the color into the height, put the normal into the normal. So you can see we've got our pores insetting into the lemon, but we don't want it that much. So I'm going to turn this down, turn the distance 0.015, very small. So a soft fall off. Add a center point to kind of be able to tweak this a little. This whole white area at the top, you imagine that is the plateau. And then here's where we're kind of tweaking our pores. And we want to do, because the white black value of this Voronoi is actually inverse of what we want for roughness, we can actually just put an invert color node here. Run this into the roughness. A second to think about it. Is that right? Oh, I put it into the factor, not the color. It's like something was going wrong. I'm going to put the index of reflection up. I think that's the index of reflection, not refraction, because no light's passing through it. I don't know what that is, but bump it up a little bit. Maybe even take this strength down a little. Maybe get the color. This is maybe too high contrast from the lemon color. Maybe I'll grab the lemon color so it's the same, and just tweak it down a little bit. Sometimes the most reflective is a little, maybe this is what we want. Take this light and tweak it to maybe turn it, oops, not 50, 500. I think I'm blowing out the top of the lemon, get a little bit more of a natural light. I'm going to move it, I want to see. Look at it from the top. Back to that side view. I get a little bit on the top nub and start to see kind of this pore texture of the lemon. It's we're gonna kind of drown this out with some bigger displacement, so we're gonna have to come back and tweak this. So this is good enough for now for this step. Okay, now we're gonna add some displacement. One thing I realized was I was in the wrong render, so I want to set this to cycles, set it to GPU, and turn the viewport samples way down. This will run a lot smoother and look a lot better. Kind of take the edge off that. Edge light 2. Turn it down. Okay, so what we want to do is essentially add 2 different displacement textures, and one's going to be this kind of bumpiness that's exaggerated here on the surface of this lemon, and the other one is kind of a broader, more striated displacement, and that's going to kind of also just give the lemon a little bit more of a random shape. First thing I'm going to do actually is I'm going to go back into the thing. I'm just going to reduce the nub width a little bit and make this look a little more lemony. Shift F3 back into our shader. I'm going to add a noise. We're going to have two noises. I'm going to do Control Shift to preview one and turn the detail up on it. Get a little rougher. What I'm going to do is Control T. I think this might be part of the Node Wrangler add-on. If you don't have that in there, you can just add by hand a mapping and texture coordinate node. But what this is going to let us do is kind of stretch this on the z-axis a little bit and get a little bit of this striation. Then for this one, maybe this down, a little grittier, a little rougher. And we want to mix these together. And what we're going to do is use a mix color. And if you're familiar with Photoshop blend modes, we're going to use multiply. And, I don't think it matters which one we put where, because they're just going to, essentially the black values are going to be added. We can see the result of that. There, we've got kind of a mix of the striation. I put that in a 4D, so we get this kind of time value where we can vary it and you can see it. And we want to put this in a vector displacement, which is going to run into our displacement. Put our color back, displacement, and we want to make sure, yeah, we've got displacement set to displacement. This is way too much. Put this down to 0.3, bring up the mid-level. Now we can kind of see that broader texture. Make that a little bigger. Come through. Then the smaller one. Tweak the scale of it down, and might be a little hard to see here, but what's actually happened is we've drowned out a lot of the pores. So I'm actually going to bring the pores up. So we can start to see them through that displacement. That might be overkill. It's hard to tell. And there's a lot of dark grit and high contrast to the lemon that doesn't exist on real lemons. And part of that is because of subsurface scatter. We actually want to let light kind of bounce down through the lemon to a certain degree. Maybe this is, I'm going to grab the original lemon color for this and then just darken it a little bit. And be light in this. And maybe not. This lemon color. The roughness of this one's a little much. The secondary color, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to grab the primary lemon again and then vary this much more subtly. Sometimes even here you can see there's a little bit of green in the lemon. Maybe not that much. Whoops. You can also go into the subsurface and say the radius of the subsurface is RGB, so you could say, oh, I want way more green showing through the center of the lemon, or more red. So you can kind of tweak what colors what the colors are going through. So, and that's getting there. I think let's see if I can take down the glossiness a tiny bit. More lemony, a lot of this is now at this point, it's as much about lighting as it is texturing. But there you have it, and you can work with your reference images and your noise textures and kind of get it to be the amount bumpiness and the amount lemony that you want. It's a little bigger scale and a little more dramatic. If you want to kind of try to match a little bit more of a bumpiness, but that's pretty much it for getting all the pieces in place to have all the factors of the lemon to play with. So now what I'm going to do is, actually I don't know how this got so dark. This should just be a subtle nuance. I'm going to go back to the node and I'm going to play with some inputs. So what an input is if you put this geometry node on an object, you can have controls to actually tweak these values. So what I'm going to do is in this group input, I'm going to go over here to group. And right now we just have this geometry in, but I'm going to add an input. I'm going to call it size. Whoops, caps lock, fail, size. And we're going to, right now our size is 1. So a lot of this stuff is dependent on size and it's easy to break it. So what I'm going to say is size is a float. Its default is 1. And let's say, what if we could take it from a 0.8 to a 1.2, so we can vary the size 20% bigger or smaller. That's even a lot. I'm going to do 0.9 and 1.1, so we can do 10% bigger and 10% smaller. And now we have this size attribute on our group input. We also have size over here on our geometry node modifier. And I'm going to set this to 1. If we had put this group node on a new object, it would have defaulted to 1 because of us setting the default over here. And now it's as simple as taking this size and putting it into everywhere that we'd use this size value. Then X, I'm going to get rid of the size value. And now we have this ability to tweak the size of our lemon from over here. And one neat thing about that is if you made multiple lemons, you can vary the size of the lemons independent from one another. So that is pretty cool. So you can imagine you can have randomized values or you can have as many inputs here as you want. Let's do one more where we actually pipe a value in from the geometry node to the shader, and that is a fun process. Okay, so let's make a new group input and let's call it bumpiness. And let's actually make a subtype of percentage and default it to 100%. This is minimum 0, maximum 100. Let's set this to its default. And default attribute, I'm going to say bump out, and that is important. You know what? That wasn't it. Sorry, this isn't good. Bump out. Let me think for a second. We want another output node that is going to be a float, and its default attribute is going to be bump out. And then here we can see let me set this to the same values as the in. I'm going to say I'm going to duplicate my group input over here and pipe bumpiness to the bump out. Does this say socket? Yeah, socket. I'm going to rename this bump out to match the default attribute out. So we've got a out port called bump out. It's got a default attribute of bump out. Manage attributes. If you put this on a new thing, this would have defaulted to bump out, but since we created it, then set the default, it didn't get that. So go over this real quick. Oh, geez, I put size in there. Oh, I need bump out in there. So bumpiness is an input. It's a percentage, and we can set it. We said add input, set it to bumpiness. It's a percentage. And then we set another output, called it bump out, set its default attribute to bump out. Then from the group input, we piped bumpiness to bump out. Now, oops, Control F3. I don't know what I'm doing. Shift F3. Get into our shader node. And let's say our bumpiness is, right now it's 0.26, and then you can go down to 0. So let's make a map range where 0 to 100 maps to 0 to 0.26. And we can put our value at let's put our value at 100. 100 in should map out to 0.26. So put that there, nothing changes, but now I have a percentage control of how bumpy this lemon is. And all I'm going to do is add an attribute. The factor in here. I'm going to set this to bump out, and we cross our fingers that now we must have this lemon selected. Let's try on this one. Is this working? Maybe this one, yeah, we need to set the bump out. We need to spell it right. Now we have bumpiness control per lemon. We have size control per lemon. And you imagine you can spend all day piping values from one input to an output and really have control over the color, size, texture, bumpiness, translucency. You know, you can kind of have at it. So that's it. And feel free to go through the Medium article in the description, as well as there's a Gumroad asset that is a lemon texture where I spent a little more time adding control for the nubs more and stems. And I also put in, this is supposed to be darker, this drop down where you can change the color, size. This is changing tons of settings, and you can override that, and it's avocado mode, and then you've got control over all these bumpiness and top nub and the bottom nub. You can even go into this color selector, change the color, make your own weird citrus. And feel free to dig through how I've done this with like it's just tons of conditional switches based on the inputs, and it's fun to go into the shader too, which is it's super clean and organized in groups and labeled, and you can see how I've set up all these different attributes piping through from the geometry nodes to the shader. Thank you.